The day my HOA Karen called the cops on me for refusing to give her free gas, I was standing in my driveway with a fuel nozzle in my hand, filling my own truck. It was a hot July afternoon, cicadas screaming in the oak trees, the air shimmering above the asphalt. I had just finished servicing 3 lawnmowers for my small landscaping business and was topping off my work truck from the above-ground tank I keep on the side of my house. The tank was properly permitted, double-walled, sitting inside a concrete containment pad I'd poured myself. It was safer than half the gas cans sitting in people's garages. My name is Jake Miller. I'm a mechanic by trade and the owner of Miller Grounds and Maintenance, a 3-man outfit that keeps half the yards in Redwood Oaks looking better than they deserve, given how the HOA treats us. My wife and I bought this place 5 years ago because it was one of the few communities near Austin that allowed work trucks in the driveway. The CC&Rs said nothing about fuel tanks, only that outbuildings and commercial activity had to be in harmony with the neighborhood. I'd pulled a permit from the city fire marshal before I ever set that tank in place. The first time my HOA president, whose actual name is Brenda but might as well be Karen, saw the tank, she marched over like she was about to shut down a drug lab. She wore athleisure, full makeup at 10 a.m., and carried a clipboard like it was a badge. "What is that?" she demanded, looking at the white steel cylinder like it might explode on cue. "Diesel tank," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "For my business. All permitted, safer than filling cans every day." "You can't have a gas station in your driveway," she snapped, even though the flammable placard clearly said diesel. "This is a residential community." "Correct," I said, "and this diesel is on my residential lot. City signed off, fire marshal signed off. Your rules don't say a word about it." She didn't like that answer. Brenda never liked any answer that wasn't absolute obedience. She sniffed, scribbled something on her clipboard, and flounced back to her Range Rover. A week later, the first letter arrived. Notice of violation, unapproved structure, hazardous material. They gave me 10 days to remove the tank or face daily fines. I walked that letter straight into my garage, pulled out my file bin, and made a copy of my city permit and the fire marshal's inspection sheet. On the bottom of her violation notice, I wrote, "See attached. Your CC&Rs defer to fire code and municipal permits. You have no authority here." I dropped it off at the HOA office like a homework assignment. 2 weeks of silence. Then Brenda showed up again, this time neighborly. She knocked on my door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Jake," she said, dragging out my name, "some of the board members are uneasy about your fuel tank, but maybe we can come to an arrangement." I leaned against the doorframe. "What kind of arrangement?" "Well," she said, glancing past me toward the driveway where my truck sat, "we have HOA equipment, the generator at the clubhouse, the lawnmowers we use for the common areas. Fuel is so expensive these days. It would really help the community if we could draw from your tank, for official use, of course. We can overlook the violation if you're a team player." It took me a second to realize what she was suggesting. "You're asking me to give the HOA free diesel so you don't fine me for something that isn't against the rules?" She bristled. "I'm asking you to support your community. We'd keep a log. You could even write it off." "Brenda, I buy that fuel with my business account," I said. "I track every gallon. I'm not donating it so you can run the clubhouse AC on my dime. And you don't have the power to overlook something that's not a violation." The smile disappeared. "You'll regret that," she said, and walked away. I figured that was the end of it. I underestimated how much a little authority could warp someone who'd never had any before. Fast forward to that July afternoon. I was filling my truck, sweat running down my back, Atlas, the shop dog, snoozing in the shade, when I heard the shriek, "You cannot do that! Stop right now!" Brenda was standing at the edge of my driveway, phone held up like she was live streaming a crime. Her hair was perfect despite the heat, her face already flushed with righteous fury. "I'm filling my own tank from my own fuel on my own property," I said. "Pretty sure that's still legal in Texas."
"You're operating an illegal gas station," she declared, voice pitched just loud enough for the neighbors to peek through their blinds. "You refuse to let us access it. You're hoarding fuel while people are struggling. This is dangerous and selfish, and I am done playing nice." "Then maybe start by learning the difference between gas and diesel," I muttered, replacing the nozzle, "and between your property and mine." She jabbed at her phone screen. "That's it. I'm calling the police. I'm reporting you for fire code violations and threatening behavior." I actually laughed. "Threatening? The only thing I'm threatening is this truck's empty tank." Her eyes lit up like she'd won something. "You just wait," she said. "The officer will explain the law to you. And don't even think of moving that thing. I've got it all on video." 20 minutes later, sure enough, a county sheriff's SUV turned down our quiet cul-de-sac. Lights off, but presence loud enough. Neighbors were fully at their windows now. Brenda practically waved him into my driveway like she was guiding a plane. "Officer," she called out, walking toward him, "thank goodness you're here. He's running an illegal gas station in a residential zone, he refused to share fuel during an emergency, and he's aggressive when confronted. The HOA has been trying to handle this peacefully for months." The deputy stepped out slowly, hand resting casually near his belt, eyes sweeping the scene. My truck, the tank, the dog, my very confused face. "Afternoon," he said. "Are you Jake Miller?" "Yes, sir," I said. "Before we get too far, I've got all the paperwork for this tank in my garage. And," I added, nodding toward the front of my house, "you should know there are cameras covering this driveway, audio and video." Brenda's head snapped toward the little dome cam under the eave. She hadn't noticed it before. The deputy looked between us like a man who'd seen this movie too many times. "Why don't you go grab that paperwork? Ma'am, I'll talk to you next." I came back with a manila folder, permit applications, the signed approval from the fire marshal, photos from the day of installation. He flipped through them right there on my tailgate, nodding slowly.
"Looks like you did this by the book," he said. "Double-walled, proper containment, inspected and signed by the city. You sell fuel out of here?" "No, sir," I said. "Personal and business use only. Everything's tracked. No cash, no customers. Just me and my crew." He nodded again, then walked over to where Brenda stood with her arms crossed. "Ma'am, his tank is permitted. There's no crime here." She sputtered. "What about the HOA regulations? What about the danger? He refused to cooperate with the board. He's hoarding fuel." "Not against the law," the deputy said. "And refusing to give you free fuel definitely isn't a crime." Her face went red. "You're just going to do nothing?" He sighed, adjusted his hat. "Ma'am, this sounds like a civil dispute. If you believe he's violating your covenants, take it up with your attorney. But don't call 911 for something that isn't an emergency. That line's for actual crimes and life safety issues." He handed my papers back and tipped his head at me. "Have a good day, Mr. Miller. Maybe keep that folder handy." As he pulled away, Brenda glared at me like I'd personally betrayed her. "You might have fooled him," she said, voice low and venomous, "but you haven't fooled me. That tank is going." "Tell that to the fire marshal," I said. "He's the only one whose opinion matters." She didn't answer. She just stalked back to her SUV, phone already up, already typing. That was the moment I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. But I also knew something she didn't. Once you pull the government into a fight you started out of spite, you don't get to control how deep they dig, or what they decide to inspect next. I figured Brenda would cool off after getting embarrassed in front of a deputy. I was wrong. 2 days later, an email from the HOA management company hit my inbox with the subject line, "Emergency Board Action, Unlicensed Commercial Operation." They had voted to impose daily fines of $250 until I removed the tank, cease all business activity from my home, and presented myself at a hearing to explain why my gas station shouldn't be referred to the county attorney. Most people see a letter like that and panic. What you should do is read it slowly, then go pull your own paperwork. So that's what I did.
I dug out not just my permits, but my business license, my state tax ID, my insurance policies, the boring stuff you forget exists until someone threatens it. Every I was dotted, every T crossed. Here's something bullies like Brenda never count on. When you run a legitimate small business, forcing the government to look at your books doesn't hurt you. It hurts whoever's been cutting corners. The corner Brenda chose was the clubhouse maintenance shed. A week after the cop visit, a white city truck with a fire department logo rolled slowly past my house, then turned toward the community pool. Another marked pickup from code enforcement followed. I watched from my driveway as two inspectors in navy shirts and reflective vests stepped out, clipboards in hand. They didn't come to my place first. They went straight to the clubhouse. Brenda met them there, of course, because control freaks have a sixth sense for official vehicles. She marched out from the glass doors with a thick folder, hair shellacked, smile tight. From my driveway, I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the body language, her gesturing toward my house, then the inspectors shaking their heads and pointing back at the shed.
Because here's the thing I knew that Brenda apparently didn't. When you complain to the city about someone else's fuel, inspectors don't just look at your neighbor, they look at every tank, every can, every line on the permit in the entire subdivision. Redwood Oaks had one more fuel source Brenda had conveniently forgotten about, the ancient half-buried gasoline tank feeding the emergency generator behind the clubhouse. According to the original development plans I'd seen at the county office, that tank was supposed to have been decommissioned and replaced 5 years ago when the HOA took a community resilience grant from the state to upgrade their backup power. On paper, that work was completed. In reality, the same rusty vent pipe still stuck up behind the pool fence like a metal weed. The inspectors disappeared into the maintenance shed for a good 20 minutes. When they came back out, the fire guy had that expression I've only ever seen on mechanics and electricians right before they say, "Who installed this crap?" He pointed at the generator, at the ground, at the fence that someone had built too close to the tank. The code inspector measured distances, took photos of staining on the soil, and wrote so much on his clipboard his pen nearly smoked. They finally walked over to my driveway. Brenda trailed behind them, looking like someone had just told her Starbucks was outlawing pumpkin spice. The fire inspector introduced himself, a guy named Ruiz with sun-creased eyes and a calm voice. "Mr. Miller, we took a look at your installation," he said. "It's exactly as permitted, no violations. Thank you for doing it right. Most people don't." I nodded. "Appreciate you checking it out." Brenda pounced. "What about the danger to the neighborhood?" she demanded. "The unsightliness, the negative impact on property values. You can't just ignore that." Ruiz turned to her. "Ma'am, our job is fire and life safety, not aesthetics," he said. "His setup is safer than filling cans in a garage. As for property values, that's between you and your members." He hesitated, then added, "You do have bigger issues to worry about." Her eyes narrowed. "What issues?" The code guy answered this time. "That old gasoline tank by your generator is out of compliance," he said. "Clearances, containment, probable leakage, and according to our records, it was supposed to be replaced years ago using state grant funds. We'll be issuing a notice of violation to the association." Brenda's lipstick-tight smile finally cracked. "That can't be right," she stammered. "Our contractor signed off. The board was told—" "Ma'am, on paper, yes. In the ground, no. Someone took the money and didn't do the work right. That's not on your neighbor. That's on whoever signed these documents." He tapped the clipboard with 2 fingers like a judge tapping a gavel. Here's what a lot of people don't realize. When an HOA takes state or federal money for improvements, they step into a whole different world of accountability. They can micromanage paint colors all day, but if they fudge a grant report or ignore safety requirements, they're not just answering to angry neighbors anymore. They're answering to agencies with investigators and enforcement divisions. Within a week, the city issued a formal notice. The HOA had 60 days to address the leaking tank, upgrade containment, and provide documentation on how the grant money had been spent. Copies went to the board, the management company, and the state office that oversaw the resilience program. One also, amusingly, came to me because I live within 300 feet of the affected infrastructure. That was how I learned just how deep Brenda had managed to bury herself. The notice referenced discrepancies between reported upgrades and observed conditions, and potential misappropriation of state grant funds. In plain English, someone took public money to do a job, didn't do it right, and now the state wanted to know why. And all of that started because Brenda couldn't stand the idea of a guy with a diesel tank telling her no. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. The next HOA email blast dropped like a grenade. Important safety update and special meeting notice, the subject said. The body was 3 paragraphs of legal oatmeal about recent communications with municipal and state agencies, legacy infrastructure concerns, and potential financial impacts to the association. At the bottom, they scheduled an emergency meeting for Thursday night in the clubhouse. That room had seen birthday parties, baby showers, and 100 boring board meetings. It had never seen a full-on mutiny. By the time I walked in, every folding chair was filled, and people were standing along the walls. The air hummed with whispered questions and that tight, nervous energy you only get when folks realize their money might be in trouble. Brenda sat at the front table, flanked by the treasurer and 2 other board members who suddenly looked a lot less sure of themselves. A thick binder sat in front of her, next to a stack of papers stamped with the city logo. Her smile was the kind politicians wear right before election results come in. "Thank you all for coming," she began, tapping the mic like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. "We've had a small issue raised by the city regarding the clubhouse generator and an older fuel tank." "Small?" someone shouted from the back. "The letter says leak and grant fraud. That doesn't sound small." A murmur of agreement rolled through the room. Brenda's jaw tightened. "The letter uses very strong language," she admitted. "However, our contractor assured the prior board that all work was completed. We are victims here as much as anyone." I almost choked. Prior board was a nice way to describe the same group of people, minus the one guy who'd quit last year over creative accounting. The treasurer cleared his throat. "There is a possibility," he said carefully, "that the state will require us to repay a portion of the grant if they determine the work wasn't done to spec, and there will be costs to bring the system into full compliance." "How much?" a woman near me demanded. "In real numbers?" "We don't know yet," he hedged. "It could be significant." "What he means," said a voice from the side, "is it could be 6 figures." Every head swiveled. Standing near the door, wearing a navy blazer and jeans, hair pulled back, expression neutral. She walked to the front like she owned the place and set a slim folder on the table next to Brenda's binder. "My name is Angela Park. I'm with the State Office of Resilience and Infrastructure. Our program administered the grant your association received for generator and fuel upgrades 5 years ago. I'm here as an observer and to answer some questions since my office keeps getting calls." You could almost hear Brenda's soul leave her body. "I want to be clear," Park continued. "Our initial review suggests discrepancies between what was reported and what exists on site. Your association certified that a new double-walled tank and containment system were installed. Our inspectors found an original single-wall tank with no modern containment within non-compliant distance of structures." She paused. Let that sink in. "Someone signed reports saying that work was complete. That someone was the association's president at the time." She tapped the folder lightly. "Ms. Brenda Collins." Brenda's hands clenched on the binder. "I signed what our contractor told us," she said quickly. "We trusted their professional judgment. This is not—" Park held up a hand. "That may be your defense in a civil action," she said. "What concerns my office right now is that for 5 years, your residents have lived next to a non-compliant underground gas tank while your board used state grant money earmarked for safety upgrades on other things." She glanced at the glossy photos on the wall of the remodeled clubhouse kitchen and new playground. A guy in a ball cap stood up, face red. "Are you saying," he said slowly, "that we paid for a fancy kitchen with money that was supposed to make sure that tank didn't blow up?"
"I'm saying," Park replied, "that's one of the things our auditors are looking at." The room erupted. Voices overlapped. "How could you? My kids play here. Who approved this?" In the middle of the chaos, one woman near the front turned in her chair and pointed at me. "And meanwhile," she said, loud enough to cut through the noise, "you've been harassing Jake over a legal fuel tank we all see every day. You called the cops on him. For what? So you didn't have to look at your own mess?" Dozens of eyes swung my direction. For once, I hadn't done anything to draw attention, aside from exist with a diesel tank that followed the rules. Brenda seized on the distraction. "Mr. Miller has been operating a commercial enterprise from his home in violation of community standards," she said, "storing large quantities of fuel in a residential neighborhood." Park cut her off. "We've reviewed Mr. Miller's permits. His installation meets code. It's above board. Frankly, if your underground tank had been installed with the same level of care, we wouldn't be here." I couldn't help it. I smiled. "Here's something every HOA board ought to tattoo on their meeting room wall. When you escalate petty disputes into official complaints, you invite real regulators into your sandbox. And once they're in, they don't just inspect the toy you pointed at, they inspect everything." One of the quieter board members, a guy named Thomas who worked in accounting, finally spoke up. "What happens now?" she asked Park. "Worst case scenario?" "Worst case," she said, "the state refers this to the Attorney General for potential fraud. The grant has to be repaid, fines are imposed, your D&O insurance might cover some of it. The rest comes from special assessments." She let that land. "Best case, you cooperate fully, remediate the safety issues fast, and we treat it as negligence rather than deception. Either way, the days of creative reporting are over." The treasurer looked like he was about to be sick. Brenda stared straight ahead, jaw set. Neighbors turned on her like a flock of birds changing direction. "You signed this. You told us everything was up to code. You tried to shut down the one guy who actually followed the rules." Someone in the back yelled, "Motion to recall the president." That got everyone's attention.
In the middle of the uproar, I felt Ruiz, the fire inspector, step up beside me. He spoke low, just for me. "You see why I tell people, get permits, do it right the first time," he said. "Liars and cheaters always get found eventually, usually when they poke the wrong bear." I glanced at him. "You mean Brenda?" He smirked. "I mean you. You're the bear she poked." He clapped my shoulder. "Hang on to your paperwork. You might be a star witness if this goes to court." By the end of the night, 3 things were clear. First, the board voted, under immense pressure, to suspend all enforcement actions related to properly permitted fuel storage pending a legal review. That was lawyer speak for "leave Jake alone before we get sued." Second, a group of owners started a formal recall petition against Brenda. It spread faster than any HOA newsletter ever had. Within a week, they had well over the required signatures. Third, the state wasn't bluffing. Investigators came back with ground-penetrating radar, soil sampling kits, and more clipboards than a high school science fair. I watched from my driveway as they marked out grids behind the clubhouse, drilled small cores into the dirt, and carefully bagged samples. One tech held up a stained chunk of soil and said something that made Park's mouth turn into a thin line. A month later, a final letter went out. The tank was leaking. Not catastrophically, but enough. The state levied fines, demanded partial repayment of the grant, and required immediate remediation. The HOA's insurance took a hit. So did the reserves. Special assessments loomed. And Brenda? She resigned for personal reasons 3 days before the recall vote, which is HOA code for leave now or be pushed. Rumor had it the association's lawyer had a very direct conversation with her about personal liability, signatures on grant documents, and the joys of answering questions under oath. The new board, led by, ironically, Thomas, the accountant, took a very different tack. They sent me a letter, not a violation notice, but an apology. "Mr. Miller," it read,
The previous board's actions regarding your licensed fuel storage were inappropriate and inconsistent with both our governing documents and applicable law. We are rescinding all prior fines and enforcement related to your tank and have updated our policies to defer to municipal and fire code on safety matters. At the next annual meeting, they even asked me to speak for 5 minutes about best practices for small home-based businesses and working with, not against, the code. I kept it simple. Get your permits, follow the law, document everything, and if someone with a clipboard and a title tries to bully you into something that doesn't feel right, don't yell, don't threaten, just keep your records, and if you have to, let the people with real authority sort it out. Later that evening, as the sun slipped behind the oaks and the heat finally eased off the asphalt, I stood in my driveway with a cold drink, watching my kid shoot hoops with the neighbor's boys. The diesel tank sat quiet in its concrete cradle, reflecting the orange light. Atlas snored in the shade. Across the cul-de-sac, a for sale sign had sprouted in front of Brenda's house. Rumor said she was moving somewhere with a more respectful community. I just hoped wherever she landed didn't offer grants. My truck's tank was full, my permits were in order. The sheriff hadn't darkened my driveway since that day she tried to weaponize him. The state had done what it was supposed to do, protect public funds and safety, not HOA egos. I took a long pull from my bottle and felt that rare, underrated thing, peace, in my own damn driveway. Sometimes, all it takes to beat a petty tyrant is one solid no, a stack of paperwork, and the patience to let their own overreach bring the real inspectors to their door.